The old man shuffled into the Chase Bank on a Tuesday. An unremarkable day, just like any other. The sky was overcast, casting a dull light over the city, and the streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle of people going about their daily routines. The Rockview branch bustled with the usual lunchtime crowd. Customers queued up, waiting for their turn, some impatiently tapping their feet, others engrossed in their smartphones. The air was filled with the low hum of conversations and the occasional ring of a phone. Tellers served customers with practiced smiles, their hands moving swiftly over keyboards and cash drawers. They exchanged pleasantries, their voices a blend of professionalism and warmth, masking the monotony of their tasks. Loan officers spoke in hushed tones, discussing interest rates and repayment plans. Their conversations were serious, their faces reflecting the weight of financial decisions being made. The air hummed with the quiet rhythm of finance. Papers rustled, printers whirred, and the occasional clink of coins added to the symphony of the bank's daily operations. No one noticed the old man at first. He moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if each step was a calculated effort. His presence was unassuming, blending seamlessly into the background of the busy bank. He blended into the background, a shadow among the bustling crowd. His clothes were worn but clean, his demeanor quiet and unthreatening. A shadow in the corner. Then he spoke. His voice, though frail, carried a surprising strength, cutting through the ambient noise of the bank. His voice, though frail, carried across the room. Heads turned and a hush fell over the bank as people strained to hear his words. "I've come to reclaim what's mine." Heads turned, conversations faltered. The air grew thick with curiosity and tension. The bank held its breath. Every eye was on the old man, every ear waiting for his next words. The old man stood straighter, his frail frame seeming to gain strength from the attention. He clutched a worn leather sack, his knuckles white with the effort. He clutched a worn leather sack. The bag looked ancient, its leather cracked and faded, hinting at countless stories and secrets. His eyes, faded blue and sharp as ice, swept over the room. They seemed to pierce through the very souls of those present, searching for something or someone. He fixed his gaze on the branch manager's office. The intensity of his stare was unsettling, as if he could see through the walls and into the heart of the manager himself. "Mr. Temp, I believe you have something that belongs to me." His voice was steady, filled with a quiet authority that demanded attention. Mr. Temp, a man accustomed to spreadsheets and loan applications, frowned. He was not used to such direct confrontations, especially from someone so unassuming. He emerged from his office, his face a mask of confusion and curiosity. The situation was unusual and he was unsure how to handle it. His crisp white shirt seemed to gleam under the fluorescent lights. It was a stark contrast to the old man's worn appearance. "Sir, is there something I can help you with?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. He was trying to maintain professionalism, but the uncertainty was evident in his tone. The old man smiled, then a slow, unsettling smile. It was a smile that hinted at secrets long buried and truths yet to be revealed. "You can call me TK," he said, his voice raspy with age. The name seemed to hang in the air, carrying with it a weight of history. "But my name, the name you should know, is CK Kirby." The revelation sent a ripple through the room, as if the very air had shifted with the weight of his words. A ripple of confused whispers passed through the bank. CK Kirby, the name was familiar to many, a legend in the town's history. People exchanged puzzled glances, trying to piece together the impossible. How could someone long dead be standing here, claiming to be alive? The air was thick with disbelief and curiosity. The name was etched in the building's very foundation, literally. It was a name that had been part of the town's fabric for over a century, a name that carried weight and history. A bronze plaque by the entrance proclaimed the bank's founding in 1910 by one Charles Kirkland Kirby. This plaque was a testament to a bygone era, a time when the town was just beginning to find its feet. A figure of local legend, long dead of course. Mr. Temp's frown deepened. He had grown up hearing stories about CK Kirby, the man who had built the bank from the ground up. The idea that this man could be standing in front of him now was beyond comprehension. He exchanged a bewildered look with Stephen, the security guard. Stephen, who had been with the bank for years, looked just as confused. This was not something they had been trained to handle. Stephen, a mountain of a man with biceps the size of watermelons, shifted uncomfortably. He was used to dealing with rowdy customers and potential threats, but this was something entirely different. "Sir, I think you may be mistaken," Mr. Temp said, his tone placating. He was trying to maintain control of the situation, but his mind was racing. How could this be possible? Mr. Kirby passed away many years ago. The records were clear, the history well documented. There was no doubt about it. TK chuckled, a dry, crackling sound. It was a laugh that seemed to come from another time, another world. "Passed away," he echoed, his eyes twinkling. There was a mischievous glint in his eyes, as if he knew something that no one else did. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" His tone was light, almost teasing, but there was an underlying seriousness that couldn't be ignored. "I assure you, Mr. Temp, I'm very much alive." His voice was steady, confident. There was no hint of doubt or hesitation. He hefted the leather sack. It looked old, worn, but sturdy. It was the kind of bag that had seen many years and many miles. It thumped against his side. "And I have proof." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The customers, initially amused, now watched with a flicker of unease. The atmosphere in the bank had shifted, the light-hearted curiosity replaced by a growing sense of tension. The tellers, their carefully applied smiles faltering, whispered amongst themselves. They had never seen anything like this before, and it was clear they were unsure how to react. One young woman, her name tag reading Sarah, leaned forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. She had heard the stories of CK Kirby, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined she would see him in the flesh. TK, ignoring the growing skepticism, placed the sack on Mr. Temp's polished desk. The sound of the bag hitting the desk seemed to echo in the silent room. "Why don't you take a look?" he invited, his voice soft but firm. There was a challenge in his tone, a dare to confront the impossible. Mr. Temp, his initial amusement fading, hesitated. He had come across many strange things in his life, but this was different. There was a weight to the moment, a sense of history pressing down on him. He could feel the eyes of the past watching, waiting to see what he would do next. He glanced at the sack, then back at TK. The sack seemed ordinary enough, but there was something about the way TK held it with a reverence that suggested it contained more than just old items. The old man exuded an air of quiet authority. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharpness that belied his years. It was clear that he had seen much, experienced much, and carried the weight of those experiences with a dignity that commanded respect, an aura that belied his tattered clothing and worn shoes. It was as if the very fabric of his being was woven with the threads of history, each tear and fray telling a story of its own. With a sigh, Mr. Temp untied the leather strings. The act felt almost ceremonial, as if he were about to uncover a relic from a bygone era. His fingers trembled slightly, a mix of anticipation and trepidation coursing through him. The scent of dust and time wafted from the opening. It was a smell that spoke of forgotten memories, of stories long since buried under the sands of time. It was a smell that made Mr. Temp's heart ache with a longing he couldn't quite place. Inside, nestled among layers of yellowed cloth, lay a stack of banknotes and a thick leather-bound ledger. The banknotes were crisp, their edges sharp as if they had been printed only yesterday. Yet the design was unmistakably old, a relic from a time long past. Mr. Temp drew in a sharp breath. The sight of the banknotes, so pristine yet so ancient, sent a shiver down his spine. It was as if he were holding a piece of history in his hands, a tangible connection to a world that no longer existed. The banknotes were unlike any he'd ever seen. They were a testament to a time when craftsmanship and artistry were valued, when even the most mundane objects were imbued with a sense of beauty and purpose. Crisp and new, yet emblazoned with the bank's original logo. A logo that spoke of pride and tradition, of a legacy that had been carefully built and meticulously maintained. A stylized eagle clutching a shield. The eagle, a symbol of strength and resilience, seemed to come alive under the sunlight, its wings poised for flight. A design retired decades ago, it was a reminder of a different era, a time when the world moved at a slower pace, and the values of honor and integrity were held in high regard. He gingerly picked up the ledger. The leather cover was worn, its edges frayed, but it held a certain elegance, a testament to the craftsmanship of its maker. Its pages, brittle with age, crackled in protest. Each page was a delicate whisper, a fragile link to the past that threatened to disintegrate with each turn. The script, written in elegant cursive, sent a shiver down his spine. It was a handwriting that spoke of patience and care, of a time when words were crafted with intention and purpose. Dates and figures, meticulously recorded, stretched back over a century. Each entry was a snapshot of a moment in time, a glimpse into the lives of those who had come before. The first entry, dated July 12, 1910, simply read, Charles Kirkland Kirby, founder. It was a name that carried weight, a name that spoke of ambition and vision. Where did you get this? Mr. Temp whispered, his voice hoarse. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of its implications. TK smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. It was a smile that spoke of loss and longing, of dreams unfulfilled and promises broken. These, Mr. Temp, are my memories, my legacy. He tapped the ledger. Each word was a testament to a life lived, to a journey that had been both beautiful and tragic. This book tells a story that had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. The story of this bank, my bank, a story of dreams and ambitions, of hard work and dedication. He leaned closer, his gaze piercing. It was a gaze that demanded attention, that spoke of a truth that could not be ignored, and how it was stolen from me. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the injustices that had been done, of the dreams that had been shattered. The bank held its breath. The hum of activity ceased. Even the most skeptical customers leaned closer, drawn in by the unfolding drama. Mr. Temp, his fingers tracing the faded ink of the ledger, felt a chill crawl up his spine. The dates, the figures, the meticulous records, it all aligned. He recognized names from the bank's oldest documents, transactions that mirrored framed records on the wall. It was impossible. And yet, here it was. My partner, TK began, his voice low and steady. John Williams, a man I trusted, coveted my creation. He saw the bank, not as a legacy, but as a golden goose. He wanted it all for himself. He paused, his gaze distant. It was 1965. The world was changing. Greed was the new currency. Williams, with his slick words and promises, manipulated the board, ousted me, discredited me, erased me from the bank's history. He laughed then, a bitter, hollow sound. They called me senile, delusional, said I was clinging to a past that never was. He looked at Mr. Temp, his eyes blazing. But the truth, Mr. Temp, always has a way of surfacing. What's something people don't know about the shifting sands of truth? Mr. Temp, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation, sank into his chair. He stared at the ledger, at the faded ink that spoke of betrayal and greed. He glanced at the banknotes, their vintage design, a stark reminder of a history rewritten. Around him, the bank buzzed with hushed whispers. The customers, no longer amused, watched with a mixture of fascination and unease. Even Stephen, the stoic security guard, seemed captivated, his hand straying to the taser on his belt, unsure if he should be apprehending a senile old man or protecting a wronged founder. Sarah, the young teller, met TK's gaze. She saw not a crazy old man, but a man robbed of his life's work. Her hand, as if guided by an invisible force, reached into the open sack. Mr. Temp, struggling to reconcile the impossible truth before him, flipped to the ledger's final page. There in a shaky hand was a final entry, dated June 15th, 1965. They may take my bank, it read, but they will never take my truth. CK Kirby. Below the inscription was a signature. It matched, stroke for stroke, the signature on the bank's founding documents.